Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Insight into Healing. My name is Alexa Servo-Didio, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and thank you for sending in your questions each week to insightintohealing@gmail.com. We have a great summer series going on, such incredible guests and such inspiring stories. On that note, tonight's guest joining us, Cantin, a true story of hope through unimaginable loss. Our heartfelt memoir recounts grieving mother and wife Kim's healing journey in the midst of a tragedy that gives rise to unexpected wisdom, affirming love that transcends beyond life. A natural disaster stoking tragic headlines is the backdrop of the profound retelling of the survival of Cantin and her daughter and the search for her missing son in the wake of the loss of her husband and home. Kim, welcome to Insight into Healing. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yes. We would love to hear a little bit about your story and how this all came about. I can only imagine the journey that you've been on.
Sure, yeah, it's been quite a 5 years, right? Kind of where it all started, there was a fire in December of 2017. It was then the largest wildfire in California's history. It was called the Thomas Fire, and it roared from Ventura towards Santa Barbara in the hills. And as it roared through, it was consuming all the vegetation that was holding the massive boulders in place. And so that roared on for many, many weeks. There was multiple evacuations, and we had to evacuate 3 times, and we evacuated about 40 miles south to Thousand Oaks, hoping that our house would still be standing and not burn down when we got back. And it didn't burn down. But then a few weeks later, we're into the first week of January, and they predicted heavy rain. And you got to imagine big boulders were sitting precariously on hillsides near homes, and I really felt bad for those people, going, gosh, those poor people by those homes. And I didn't really feel bad for me because our home was down in the village of Montecito. It wasn't up in the hills. Yeah. But anyway, we kept watching our Aware and Beware notifications on our phone. And we got emails and notifications if we had to evacuate, and we were not in the mandatory evacuation zone. So we were just preparing the house with sandbags, making sure the French drain was clear and all that stuff. And sadly, in the middle of the night on January 9th, right around 3 or 3:30 in the morning, a big part of the mountain crashed down, and it roared toward the village, and it plumed up in the creek that was across the lane from our house and by a couple houses. It plumed up to a 30-foot wave, and it crashed down and destroyed our family home with our family in it. And so we were all scattered, and the mudslide washed me 2 football fields away, and I was found in an intersection wrapped in electrical wires, severely injured. My husband and son were killed in the mudslide, and the family dog. And my daughter, who was 14, was whisked away 1 football field away, and she was buried alive under 20 feet of mud, a couple cars, an electrical transformer, part of a roof for about 6 hours before her miraculous rescue. She had, by the grace of God, she had a pocket of air the size of a volleyball in front of her face that allowed her to breathe, and there was a little tiny hole, like a straw-sized hole, that went out to the outside. So, but she was conscious, and so, woke up, and when they got me to the hospital, I was in surgeries, and then started to learn the magnitude of what had happened. The mudslide went over 30 square miles all the way down to the ocean, closed the freeway for 10 days. 23 people died. I think 400 people were injured. 150 people were injured, 150 people were injured. 62 homes were destroyed. So it was a pretty major natural disaster.
It just sounds so unthinkable, that something that you couldn't even imagine that could be possible, that something
Correct.
like this, that Mother Nature, that fire, anything like this could have the capability of causing so much damage.
You're right. I mean, when you think of what's going to get you, you might think of a car crash, cancer, heart attack, stroke, right? You don't think of mudslide. You just don't.
No.
And that's what got my husband and my son.
And what were those days like probably when you first found out and realized what had happened and where you were? What was that like for you, almost trying to comprehend what had just happened?
Yeah, Alex, I was in shock. I mean, I was severely injured. I'd had 2 surgeries. I was put on painkillers because I thought I had a broken hip and was in the hospital 3 weeks. So I just kind of remember shock and just it was surreal. It was surreal. I just all of a sudden I'm in a hospital and, I'm learning. And then my son was classified as missing. So I learned about Dave, I think, the next day or the day after when I was in the hospital. But Jack, he was just one of the missing. So, we really didn't hear closure. And then once I got out of the hospital, I spent about 3 years with a core group of people searching for his remains, and baby Lydia. There was a beautiful 2-year-old baby girl who was also deemed missing.
Wow. And just being able to have a parent's worst nightmare, going out on that search, trying to have some sort of closure.
Yeah, but I really wanted to. For me, it was trying to get closure. I didn't want his remains just in a debris pile with bent, chain link fence or stuff from someone's garage. I think he deserved better than that. So we went on and looked, and I think the search was some of my healing, right? Because I was really trying so hard, and I think knowing that I tried hard, and my son knows I tried hard, I think was helpful just in the process for me. He knew I tried my very best.
Absolutely. And I think so therapeutic and obviously very difficult to go through, but having that, being able to have the ability to begin that search, to go through that search, and to be aware and also experience what the disaster, and being able to walk through it and search through it and really find what had happened must have been very revealing and shocking, but also a way of saying, wow, this is kind of putting your mind, being able to grasp somewhat of this is what happened.
You're right. I mean, we got to see, we just saw big ovens twisted like a pretzel, or, we'd be out on an excavation and, find my husband's shorts, or find my nightgown, or find a spoon that was from our dining room. It was just, it was jaw-dropping, just to understand the power of Mother Nature, and the spoon was found, could have been found maybe half a mile from something else of ours. It was mind-blowing, but it was actually good to see it and be in it. My daughter just went to see our damaged property within the last month, and it's been over 5 years for her. And I got back there, and because I knew I had to, clean up the property, put a fence around it and stuff, and I think being in it and facing it was helpful for me. It wasn't easy, but it was helpful, I think.
Yes, and I find, sometimes working with clients, being exposed or being part of, kind of going back to where the scene was, if possible, especially when it's a natural disaster or something that almost the mind couldn't prepare for or grasp for, or
right.
Even think this is possible. You're able to somewhat make sense out of something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. We try to piece it all together.
Yes, getting all the different puzzle pieces. What gave you the strength to come forward and to tell your story and to say, okay, I want to move forward in this direction?
It was during COVID, actually, and it didn't start out with it was going to be a story I was going to share. I just started I better start writing stuff down about what happened so I remember it. Well, I still remember it for my future grandkids if my daughter has children one day. And in COVID, we all had extra time on our hands, right? And we're in our homes. So I just started writing, and then as I wrote, I'm like, gosh, this is kind of reflective. I could see myself going from a more desperate grief into more peaceful adaptation and integration into my life. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm wondering if this might help other people going through a tough time, if it's grief, if it's tragedy, if it's trauma. And what I've really been thrilled with is the feedback that I've gotten from people who've read the book is they're saying, thank you for writing it. It's really helped me and gain my perspective in whatever they're going through. Or if someone's in their grief, they said it helped them get access to some of their grief that they wanted to process. Other people have just given them hope. So I've gotten what's really been I've been pleased to get the feedback that people have found the book really helpful, and they blast through it in like 2 days. They're like, they just open it up and then they read it within like 2 days. They read it really fast. Because it reads not as much like a memoir, more like an action narrative, because there's so much stuff going on. There's the search, there's the tragedy, there's the everything. So that's been nice to hear.
Absolutely. And I think, the stages of grief, sometimes people don't understand, you think it goes one after the other, but there's, it can go back and forth, and each person's way they grieve and their stages of grief can be so different than somebody else's, even if they've experienced the same trauma or loss. And it's so important to be able for someone to have that tool. And yes, we can have that grieving process or access that grief while hearing someone else's story, reading someone, how they've been able to be inspired and move through their grief, because so many times people feel like they're all alone, or how does one get through this? This wasn't even something I could even imagine. Where do we go from here? And your book really is something that gave them that platform, that foundation to say, these are my stepping stones to my next step, as I say, to our walk, to your walk in life, to be able to say, okay, these are the stones I can lay my feet on, and say, wow, and I've been vulnerable in being able to say, I can hear this, and I can be able to sit with this pain in order to heal.
Yeah, and what someone told me, a really neat thing, they use the word HOPE, HOPE, as an acronym, which is hearing other people's experiences helps in the healing. And after she read the book, she goes, this is like the HOPE acronym. Hearing of your experience is going to help. And that's why I was in a group therapy with some of the victims of the mudslide, and I did individual trauma therapy and then group therapy. The group was so helpful. You learn so much from other people going through their challenges. You get something from hearing other people's. I learned so much from other people and how they were dealing with different experiences.
Yes, and I love that acronym of HOPE. I mean, that is just so powerful. And I think, as you said, when you're hearing other people's stories, hearing what other people have gone through, it really helps you realize, we all make an impact. We're all here on this earth and this journey, and being able to have that connection and being able to have someone be able to understand in some degree your pain and your journey, and being able to begin that healing process is, I find, the biggest gift, blessing we can give each other, to say we've been able to bond and be able to heal through this together.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is it, Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning or something? He says if something bad happens to you, some of the best things you can do is try to put meaning and purpose around it by doing something else through it. So for me, I didn't really realize it at the time, but I think it's the book, right? If this book helps one or two people, and I've already gotten feedback that it has, then that helps put purpose to this horrible tragedy, right? And puts meaning to it. Like take the bad and say, how do you make good out of it? And that doesn't make the tragedy okay, but it makes it it puts some positive to something that is so negative.
Yes, and also for my listeners, I can imagine some people saying, "Oh, how does that happen?" It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, obviously, you've done a lot of work to get to the place where you are now. So, but it's being open in your mind to saying that at some point I will be able to share what I've gone through and be able to find closure or find hope when someone else has begun to heal, and from my words, from what's been going on. It's so empowering, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think for each person, it's different how long their journey through this grief can be.
I mean, that's been 5 years. Yeah.
Yes. And for people not to get discouraged. Some people say, I've lost a loved one 10 years ago. Everyone says I should get over it, or I shouldn't be in this position. You know what? Grief is different for each person. It takes time.
Yeah.
It manifests in different ways. You can't rush it. You can't force it, and you can't rush it away, unfortunately.
Right. You got to give time, right? Give time.
Yes, and be able to just find what you need to learn from it and heal from it. What is life like for you now?
Well, I've been busy with the book. I'm doing speaking engagements and launch activities and, interviews and such. So that's different. I never had that in my life before, right? I never thought I'd write a book before. So that's different. My daughter's off at college, so I'm more of an empty nester. And I, do things with my friends. I go for walks. I enjoy my 2 dogs, and I try to just stay in the present, right, and not, someone told me once, the best thing toward happiness is not to get fixated on a certain outcome, whatever the outcome is. Say like, I've got to get this job, and if I don't get this job, life's going to be terrible. Or I got to get this one, car, and if I don't get this car, life's going to be terrible. Whatever, if you fixate on one thing, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And so she's like, just be more present in the moment and trust the process. And so I've really tried to do more of that. And I'm not, other than the book, I'm not, I left my corporate life after the tragedy. I couldn't go back to work. It was just too much. So it's just different. It's a different pace of life. It's a different view of life. And I'm just trying to continue on my healing journey, Yes.
What is your view of life now? What does it look like for you? What is transformed?
That's a good question. Life is something to be grateful for. I'm lucky every morning when I get out of bed and I'm heart's pumping and I can, hear the birds outside and look forward to a day. I think life is still a precious gift that we're given. So I look at it that way. It's lonelier, right? I don't have my husband and my son here. It's different. But, I've got a life, and I want to, the best thing I can do to honor my husband and son, I think, is to live a joyful, meaningful rest of my life, whatever that is. They would want me happy, just like I would want them happy if the tables were turned, right? And I want them happy up in heaven, because we loved each other so much. So kind of life is taking it one day at a time, being gentle on yourself.
Yes. And finding those moments that make you smile, that bring that peace, that bring that joy, I think are so important. And I think so many times people, they focus on, if I get this job, if I get that person, if I get that house, when I reach this, then I'll be happy.
Right.
And, those type of things don't make you happy. It has to come from within. And I know it's not easy. It's hard, and we don't know. Each person is different. We can see people that look happy, but that doesn't tell us what happy is, and that's okay. We have to figure that journey on our own, and I know it can be a lonely and hard journey, but hearing you speak, it brings inspiration. It brings hope.
Yeah.
It brings
you can do it. Just stay in the moment. Yeah. And for me, I like listening to I listen to music more now. Like what music is going to move me. There's some great songs out there, and just enjoying the song that comes on the radio. Just be in the moment and enjoy the people around you. I'm less, I don't care what I do with people as much as just enjoy people's company as people. And that's been nice,
What are the speaking engagements like? What is your audience?
It's a mix. I mean, a lot of people are really interested in, kind of what I've learned in my journey, and how I've, the resilience factor, of how did I survive this. And it's probably because they're coming from a place of whatever they're working through, because we all don't get out, of this earth life unscathed, right? We all have something something or some things that we have to work through. And so it's more, I think they're looking for that, of how because I was like the poster child of bad, right? Houses destroyed, husbands killed, sons killed and missing, dogs killed, everything's washed away, injured, daughters buried alive. Like, that's a big, poster of bad. And so for them, I think to see that I can still laugh. I actually purposely try to watch some funny movies, I just watched the other night it was Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton something, and it was just one of those funny movies that just gets you laughing.
Yes.
There's so much. The more you can laugh, and I find much more humor in things than I ever did. Like I was at a grocery store, and there was and I was just looking for vitamin C, and then there was some funny vitamin that had this really unusual, goofy name, which I'm not going to say on this thing, but it was so funny. I just laughed out loud, and because I was just so shocked to see it, and I took a picture of it, and I had to send it to some of my friends. I'm like, look at this, and it was just because it was just funny. So you just try to find where you can find the humor. You've got, laughter's good. Laughter's healthy.
Oh, it's so good for the soul. And just sometimes when you catch yourself in that deep laugh, you realize, why don't I do this more often? Why? Where do I find this? Going to a comedy show or finding that show that just brings that joy. It's so good for you mentally, spiritually, physically.
It is. It lets you unwind. It lets you put your shoulders down a bit, right? Don't take yourself so seriously, right?
Yes. And I find it's also that innocence of just looking at the world or at an object or at the supermarket. Sometimes, we go places, we have to go, we got this, we got to go here, we got to go there. It just says, we're here in this moment. Let's enjoy what's around us. Let's notice what's around us. We're, able to see it and be present in that moment. It's not easy because life happens and we all try to rush around, but it's really being able to take that time just to one foot in front of the other and slow down and to say, wow. This is where I am this day.
Yeah, and honor that wherever you are.
Definitely
right?
honor it. Yes, and defining it for yourself, and I think that's part of the journey. It's sometimes people they don't like the unknown, or what is it like? What? Give me the answer. What could it be? But the answer it's in you. You'll find it. It's in you, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be yours, and it's going to be unique, and you're going to inspire so many people, and you're going to impact so many people. We all matter, I find, because so many times people don't feel like they're seen, or they don't feel like, what is my purpose? And then you find that we all do. We all impact each other. And I just know my listeners now listening to this, it's just so empowering and inspiring for people to say, okay, I can do this. I can whatever, and we don't have to have a reason and a why and how. It's knowing to tell yourself in the morning, tell yourself during the day, I can do this, whatever it is. I'm on this path, and that's the path I'm going to be on right now, and I'm going to try and enjoy and find the simple things that can be there.
And I really found in my journey, people were my anecdote. I had a lot of people help me in the search. So many people came to help me after the tragedy, if it's bringing meals or bringing me clothes because I had no clothes or whatever it was. Everyone just tried to help. And people were my anecdote. And I was, a pretty independent person, so I usually helped other people and wasn't the one of the receiving end for help. And it was really good for me to be on the receiving end of help because I had to learn how to accept help. And people really, the kindness of people, and they, so many people did things. A locksmith changed my locks in my rental house, and I went to pay him, and he goes, "You don't have to pay me. You've lost so much." He used his skill for good, and I'm like, wow, that was so kind of you. So it's just these little things that people can do to help others. It really has a ripple effect.
And it's so beautiful. And I think so many times when people talk, when they've been through a tragedy, and they speak of the events that you just spoke about and the examples of these people say, oh, what could that mean? But it really does mean. I mean, it brings you to tears when you hear about, with that locksmith, when you hear of these stories, when you see, when there's been, 9/11 or other things, and you see people helping people or picking people up or putting them in their home and feeding them and giving them clothes. I mean, that's what life is all about. I mean,
that's what life is all about. That's what humanity is about. That's what being human's about, is helping people, and you help them as long as they kind of need it. Like one of the key learnings I got was when I was out on a search with Ann and Sherry. They were helping me, and Ann is a general contractor and drives an earth mover, like a Caterpillar. And we had been out for like 2 years, and there weren't as many big piles to go through. We'd kind of gone through them all, and so I left a little early, and I think Ann said to Sherry, or Sherry said to Ann, I don't know when, they looked around, and they didn't see many piles left. And they're like, when will we know we're done here? Because they'd come out to help me for 2 years, right? And the other one said, when Kim tells us we're done. So they were so kind and compassionate in my grief journey. They didn't say, Kim, we're done, right? They waited until they knew this search was part of my grief process and my healing process. And they stood with me for over 2 years with it. And that is something I'll take when I see someone else with grief. It's not on my time when they get over it. It's how can you be kind and helpful until that other person is through their own unique grief journey. That's a gift.
Yes. And it's so empowering, and you just to know that people are capable. And I think we forget about that. We forget about the beauty in people and what gifts people can give to us that can change our lives is just so important. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be monetary, right? Not at all. Gifts of compassion.
Yes.
Gifts of time.
Compassion, empathy, listening, a hug, just being there can transcend someone's journey into something they'll remember for the rest of their life, that one moment that changed forever.
Absolutely.
It's just beautiful. Well, we're at the end of the show, and I just again wanted to thank you so much for coming on. And where can my listeners find your book, follow you, find out where you're speaking next, and be a part of your journey?
Sure. So the book is Where Yellow Flowers Bloom, and it's on Amazon. That's the easiest place to get it. It's also in some bookstores in Santa Barbara. KimCantin.com, and it's Cantin like a tin can, Cantin, KimCantin.com. It has events and media. It has, where different events will be. But the easiest place to get the book is on Amazon, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for sharing your story. It's been just a pleasure to have you on this evening.
Oh, thanks so much. Take care now.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep sending in your questions to insightintohealing@gmail.com. Everyone, have a good night, and God bless.